Good morning. It is Thursday, May the 23rd, and this is The Drill. Thank you very much. This is Ron, your host. My full name is Ronald T. Hardgrove, and I am doing this podcast to explain that my podcast is about the difference between being a true conservative and being a reactionary. It's about who the true conservatives are, why it matters, and what to do about it. My email address is storytimes@hotmail.com. What is a true conservative? Being truly conservative is about walking the talk, about how one lives, not just how one votes. It's not just a political, but a philosophical position. True conservatism is fundamentally about being realistic, and being realistic is fundamentally about making the presumption for the status quo. Who are the true conservatives? Currently, there are only two true conservatives in the United States today, President Trump and myself. And we are truly conservative because of the way we live our lives, not just in how we vote. We are patriotic. We use common sense. We trust our judgment. We speak clearly and definitively. We are not afraid to say no. We are open-minded and ask why rather than why not. We are consistent, credible, and influential. We are not ashamed of our existence, not afraid to learn, not afraid to correct our mistakes, and expect to be represented rather than led. In short, we are normal Americans. Who are the reactionaries? The reactionaries are all of the pundits, the right-wing pundits, or actually the people that think they are conservative because of where they stand on the issues, which includes all of the right-wing pundits. This is wrong. This kind of thinking is what Ayn Rand referred to as definition by non-essentials, and what Sister Miriam Joseph referred to as definition by accidents. How somebody thinks about an issue is less important than how they arrived at their conclusion. If they arrive at the position because they make the presumption for change, they are idealistic, left, and wrong. If they arrive at their conclusion by making the presumption for the status quo, they are realistic, conservative, and right. What about objectivists and libertarians? Objectivists and libertarians are idealistic. Objectivists want an ideally objective world. Libertarians want an ideally free world. Objectivists and libertarians are the opposite side of the same coin as socialists. Since any idealistic idea requires the initiation of the use of force in order to be potent, of the three idealisms noted, only socialists are a political threat. Let me be clear. Being truly conservative is realistic, effective, and true. Anything else is idealistic, ineffective, and false. Or to put it more simply, being truly conservative is right, and everything else is wrong. So what? What difference does it make how one defines the word conservative? It matters because socialism is only a force today because of the right. If the average person on the right knew how the left really operated, then socialism would be dead in America today. How? How does the left consistently defeat the right and remain a force in American politics? The left can only remain viable with the help of the right, by tricking the right into doing the left's work for it, by manipulating, bullying, and intimidating. What should a true conservative do? The first thing to know is what a true conservative should not do. A true conservative must not put politics first and realize that the battle is cultural. Culture informs politics, not the other way around. Understand the left's psychologistic tools. Understand that the left wants you to do their work for them. They want you to spread the disease, to mimic their communication styles and content. They want you to prove yourself, to prove that change is not necessary. They want you to waste your time and incriminate yourself. Waste time by wrestling with arbitrary claims. Incriminate yourself by trying to prove a negative, trying to prove that you are not a racist, misogynist, homophobe, etc. And that brings us to today's veteran tribute or veteran memorial, and it is for U.S. Army Sergeant First Class E7 Ranger Christopher B. Demige. Born on October 5th, 1982 in Santa Ana, California, he graduated from Rancho Bernardo High School in 2000. He enlisted in the Army in July 2001 in San Diego, California, and went on to complete basic training. He was then trained as a fire support specialist at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, before completing basic airborne school. He was then sent to Fort Benning, Georgia, where he completed the Ranger Assessment and Selection Program, earning the coveted Ranger tab. He at some point during his career completed Pathfinder School and was assigned to C Company, 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment in 2002. During his time with the 2 of 75, he served as a forward observer and as a Reconnaissance Joint Terminal Attack Controller, JTAC, a rare opportunity for someone in the Army, as it is mostly reserved for Air Force personnel. In 2003, he was part of the team that rescued Jessica Lynch after her convoy was ambushed by Iraqi forces during the Battle of Nazira. On October 22, 2011, Sergeant First Class Demige and 2 other Rangers were sadly killed in action during a roadside bomb attack in Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. He was just 29 years old at the time and had completed at least 14 deployments throughout his career. He leaves behind his wife and 2 daughters, as well as his mother and brother. He was buried with full military honors. Rest easy, warrior. Always remembered, never forgotten. Rangers lead the way. And that was, again, U.S. Army Sergeant First Class Christopher B. Demige. And now we move on to the concept of the day from the Ayn Rand lexicon. And today's concept is decorative arts. The task of decorative arts is to ornament utilitarian objects such as rugs, textiles, lighting fixtures, etc. This is a valuable task and often performed by talented artists, but it is not an art in the aesthetic, philosophical meaning of the term. The psycho-epistemological base of the decorative art is not conceptual, but purely sensory. Their standard of value is appeal to the senses of sight and or touch. Their material is color and shapes in non-representational combinations, conveying no meaning other than visual harmony. The meaning or purpose is concrete and lies in the specific object which they decorate. As a recreation of reality, a work of art has to be representational. Its freedom of stylization is limited by the requirements of intelligibility. If it does not present an intelligible subject, it ceases to be art. On the other hand, a representational element is a detriment in the decorative arts. It is an irrelevant distraction, a clash of intentions, and although designs of little human figures or landscapes or flowers are often used to decorate textiles or wallpaper, they are artistically inferior to the non-representational designs. When recognizable objects are subordinated to and treated as mere pattern of colors and shapes, they become incongruous. And that was decorative arts, the concept of the day from the Ayn Rand lexicon. So what's important about the Ayn Rand lexicon and the concept of the day is to emphasize that being a modern human being involves conceptualizing and abstracting. The left wants to take us in the opposite direction. The left wants to take us backwards, back to the caveman days when you communicated by telling stories and painting pictures. In this case, we would be painting verbal pictures. But that is backwards and left, and being conceptual and abstract is modern thinking, is acting like a modern human being. You'll find that a lot of times if you read something, particularly something that was written 100 or so years ago, particularly let's say in the 1700s, you read some of the correspondence of some of the founding fathers, for instance, and it's something you have to get used to. You read it, and you might have to read it 2 or 3 times to really understand what it is that they're trying to communicate. Why? Because we're used to, in today's society, because of the domination of the left in our culture, communicating by telling stories and painting verbal pictures. And it's the wrong way to communicate. It takes longer, and it is imprecise. The best way to communicate, the better way to communicate, I should say, and the correct way to communicate is to conceptualize and abstract. One of the things that I had heard on the radio was talk about, and I hear it all the time, is various polls and surveys, and that you hear the pundits, particularly those that consider themselves conservatives, that will use various polls and surveys to illustrate this or that or the other thing, and illustrate how wicked the left is, or how Donald Trump is defeating the left, or whatever. But they all make the same mistake, and in that they assume that these polls and surveys are representative samplings of the American people. I hear these pundits say all the time, in the latest survey, 20% of the American people think X, 80% of the American people think Y. Baloney. They're not representative samplings. It used to be that what you would do years ago when you were doing a survey was you did pick people at random. You'd pick people's names out of a phone book. Okay, this person, and you get up a certain amount of folks, and you would ask them a question. When you got your results tabulated, then the way you would report it is within the context of the survey or poll itself. So you would say, of those surveyed, 20% think X. Of those surveyed, 80% think Y. So why has it changed? The short answer is power. If you tell people, it's psychological power, psychological bullying and intimidation. If you tell people 20% of those surveyed think X, Y, Z, and 80% think whatever, this kind of, you think to yourself, that's kind of interesting. Okay, it has a different psychological impact than if you say 20% of Americans think X. So if you want to shape public opinion, then what you do is you take a poll or a survey and you assign it a weight or power that it really doesn't have. If, let's say, your idea is to convince more people to approve of abortion, you could get a poll or a survey that in which you would say 20% of Americans think abortion is wrong, 80% of Americans think abortion is right. Then if you are, and as somebody that is against abortion, then you're going to feel that you are the odd man out, that there's something wrong with you. Okay, now if they put the poll or the survey in its accurate terms, of those surveyed, 20% don't like abortion. Of those surveyed, 80% approve of abortion, and that there was 1,000 people surveyed, because that's usually the number, is between 500 and 1,000 people out of 350, 60, or 70 million people. There's no way that 1,000 people can be considered a representative sampling. So when you're listening to a poll or a survey, listen for that. And if you hear them say Americans, so many Californians, remember, it's BS. You're being misled. You're being lied to. And don't let that happen. Remember that it's only reporting or reflective of those surveyed or polled. The same thing goes with studies. Universities will do certain studies in which they declare something to be healthy or unhealthy, or that creates certain kinds of problems or has certain kinds of side effects. And the left will use the same tactic where they will say, try to make this, and usually it's about 500 people in the study, that it is a representative sampling of the population at large. and try to claim that, well, let's say, for instance, they wanted to say that salt is bad for you. So they did a study, and they found that 57% of the people who ate X amount of salt or had X amount of salt in their diet ended up getting a stroke. And 43% did not get a stroke. Now listen to the way they're putting that. They're not saying of those in the study. Of the 500 people studied, 57% went on to have a stroke. That's different. That is psychologically a huge, huge difference. And so you have to be on guard for that kind of thing, because the left, again, the battle is for sanity. The battle is for our culture, and whether or not we are going to acknowledge reality, or we're going to be a country that spends its time fantasizing and pretending. A clear case of that is with gender neutrality and things of that nature, transgenderism, where people are deciding on their own whether or not that they're a third option, that they're not male, they're not female. Okay, so is that kind of attitude going to stand? No, it won't. I mean, part of the problem here with the left in doing these kinds of things is that two problems. Number one, they're creating, they're balkanizing their movement. They're balkanizing the Democrat Party. They're breaking it down into smaller and smaller constituencies, all of whom expect to share power. And so that's going to create rifts within the party itself. But it also creates problems in that you can't contradict reality for a long period of time without suffering the consequences. And one of the immediate consequences of this transgender trend is miscommunication. How do you communicate about somebody who claims to be neither male nor female? The transgenderists say that they want to be called they or some other kind of a word or whatnot. And it is, again, it's miscommunication, and it's not something that's likely to catch on. People know and understand from the time that they grow up and the time that they're born as they grow up about how things are and how reality is. And it's going to be extremely difficult to get the majority or even a large enough minority of people in this country to go along with what it is that these transgender people want to do. They are basically trying to exercise some sort of power, and they want to exercise the ultimate power, and that is the power over reality. And again, remember, the left tries to pretend that reality is subjective, that what is real is what the majority says is real. Whether or not transgenders have any power depends on whether or not the majority says they do, and whether or not we will refer to transgenders in the ways that they want to be referred to is dependent again on a vote. And in reality, metaphysical reality is not up for a vote. There's two types of reality, man-made and metaphysical. And the left likes to pretend that all realities are man-made, including gender. So, not so, by the way, wrong, absolutely wrong. And so that brings me to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. And until next time, thank you very much for joining me, and have a great day.